Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.
You're listening to Peace Fund Radio with Ethan Dettenmaier and Adrian Paul, right here on LA Talk Radio. Good morning.
Good morning.
Ah, yes, you're here. This is good.
I am here. How are you? How was the show last week? I heard the ratings went up in my absence.
They actually doubled, I think.
Is that all? Shame. I thought it would have done much better.
Yeah, no, I mean, we missed you last week. I mean, I was operating the board. I actually became the producer extraordinaire here.
Yeah, and you've got the skill set for it. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, well, pushing a couple of buttons and raising those things. So, yeah,
well, that's not demean the job. It's just pushing a couple of buttons.
Well, it's just actually, I must admit, at the end, I was like, oh my god, which one do where do I go to?
It is funny looking at the control board that you wonder how much of this is actually functionary and how much of it is put into this console for effect to make it look like a bigger job.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I always wondered that about soundboards too. You know, when you're sound mixing and stuff.
And it's huge.
It's a board that's the size of a room. It's not, and I'm not joking about that. It's the size of a 10 by 15 room, and there are hundreds almost of dials and knobs and. What I see is about 5 or 6 of them being used. Right.
It's like that Seinfeld angle of is this really all that necessary? But in order for them to charge you an exorbitant rate,
well, you need to have the facility to do it. Exactly. Yeah.
Look at all this stuff. It's NASA in here. There you go.
Yeah.
How are you?
Well, this is good. It's been a very busy week.
I can tell. Very busy for both of us, but it looks like it's been extremely busy for you. It looks like the TED offensive of craziness.
Yeah, it's been. We're in funding on 2 pictures right now. Once that goes through, I'll announce all of that. As long as it does go through, What?
Well, we've all been there too. Unfortunately, what's the timeline like on it? Do you know?
Well, the next 2 or 3 weeks we've been told, so we'll get to see whether that happens, won't we? So,
okay.
But I've got another 4 pictures we're working on separately on something else. So
with a completely different funding.
Completely different funding. Yeah, it's for completely different funding. Some very good attachments to it. We're doing a lot of deals at the moment, so it's
good.
It's a very busy time. Plus, trying to figure out where my daughter's going to go to school and where we're going to live.
Yeah,
we haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
So We got to get settled. Anyway, we talk about education, because talking about my daughter, we're talking about education, which is what we were talking about last week, and we were talking about the week before, and we're going to continue talking for the next couple of weeks here on Peace Fund Radio. But just as a reminder, this is National Volunteer Week, April 12th to the 18th.
Oh, excellent.
Yep. National Volunteer Week is a time to celebrate people doing extraordinary things through service. It was established in 1974. The focus is on the national attention on impact and power of volunteerism and service. And it teaches by working together in our respective communities, we have the collective power to make a difference, which is what I've always said. Power in numbers. Look at Facebook. Look at Twitter. Look at all these social media sites. There's power in numbers. So, everybody, how will you serve National Volunteer Week? And we're going to challenge you to find a way to create your change in your own community and share your stories and photos with us on our Peace Fund Radio Facebook page. Can you do that? I don't know. Do you think somebody could do that? Do you think somebody out there would actually be able to share? I think you can. That's my rant for this morning. Ethan. Anyway, children in need. It's the education global issue.
Yes.
Global issue. Education. It's a great driver of social, economic, and political progress. And as kids learn to read, count, and reason critically, prospects for health and prosperity expand exponentially, as we've said before, the domino effect, basically. But our advances in education have not necessarily benefited everyone equally. Educating kids helps reduce poverty. It gives the next generation tools to fight poverty and conquer disease. And school also offers children a safe environment, we hope, which is one of the other issues, the safe environment that we would like our kids to be living in, with support, supervision, and socialization. And here they learn life skills that can help them prevent disease, include how to avoid HIV, AIDS, and malaria. Children may receive life-saving vaccines, fresh water, nutrient supplementation at school, so many different things that school gives our kids. So before we actually get into this discussion, Ethan, there's some facts here that we need to look at. There's 67 million primary school aged children who are still denied the right to education. As many as 115 million children of primary school age are not enrolled in school, and more than 226 million do not attend secondary school. Those numbers actually stagger me. 226 million. That's almost the size of the US. That's like 2/3 of the size of the US. Think about it. It's 20 million people in the US?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah. It's nearly 2/3 the size of the US of children do not attend secondary school. Illiteracy. It's highest among females. More than 20 developing countries, illiteracy rates amongst women exceed 70%. Of the 67 million out-of-school primary school children, primary school age children, 53% are girls, and of lower secondary out-of-school adolescents, 52% are girls. And while girls are less likely to be in school, boys are more likely to repeat grades or drop out altogether. There's a lot of other facts here that, kind of gets me going on this, but attacks on education have become much more visible. You've got the shooting of Malala Yousafzai, who was shot for daring to go to school. He was shot for daring to go to school, and of course, when she went to school, not he went to school, and basically we cheered when, she won her fight for her life. But now there are kidnapping of girls in Nigeria by terrorists who want them to stop going to school. I mean, why would people want to stop somebody going to school? What do you think? I mean, what's the reason for it?
Well, anytime you're trying to block education or the process of improving intelligence, it's usually because you yourself stand for something ignorant that you want to maintain. Hence the political machine in the United States.
Well, there is that. I mean, obviously, the more you actually keep people uneducated, the less they are aware of the situation and can have a voice to express their opinion against something. And people don't want that. They want to actually keep the general population down.
Well, education encourages people to begin to think for themselves, which is sort of the enemy of a lot of fundamental ideas out there. The Nigeria thing baffles me, honestly.
I don't get it. I mean,
I cannot believe we can't find these people.
Yeah, well, I mean, no, but I can, because in reality, when you're dealing, it's very much like Afghanistan. You're dealing with mountains and places that you're not aware of, and there are a lot of places to hide. So, I mean,
if Nigeria can get a soccer team trained for the World Cup, can we not find over 200 schoolgirls held hostage?
They could be in the middle of a forest. I mean, think about that.
But somebody somewhere
knows something. But listen, you've got to think about it. When you're living in that type of situation, you're dealing with fear, and fear is a big factor. And these guys could come back and kill you, your family, your mother, rape your wife, daughter, children, whatever. I mean, because that's what the repercussions are, and so people are not talking.
This is horrific. That situation is particularly horrific.
Well, Africa does have that. I mean, I was talking the other day. We were actually working on some programs regarding funding for certain countries right now.
A new Rambo movie, perhaps?
No, it has nothing
suited for it.
No, it has nothing to do with that. It's actually this is real funding that we're working on. If it works, it'll work very well. But the comment was regarding this: the African political structure is too volatile to actually be able to put money in there without not knowing where it's going to go. Unless you actually have organizations that are there that to actually be able to fund a government is very hard, because you don't know what it's funding. You have no real source to know where it's funding. I mean, as you said, Nigeria funds a football team, but you can't find 200 people in the middle of Nigeria. So, there's obviously something that's not going right. I mean, basically, you know something, that in 2000 the UN had the goal for education for all, but it's still struggling with that. It's extending to every child the opportunity to learn and to fulfill his or her full human potential.
Right.
But we're still, look at those numbers I gave. 226 million children still don't attend secondary school. I mean, it's staggering. When you're talking about not knowing about why do people suppress things? Educated girls and women are less vulnerable for HIV infection, human trafficking, other forms of exploitation, and are much likely to marry later and have fewer children. So education can help decrease the spreading of infectious diseases as well. So there are so many things that it does, and I think sometimes in some of these places, like human trafficking, why would you want your victims to be aware of something like that when that's your business? And in a lot of these places, and I'm probably thinking Nigeria is one of them, that's one of the ways that people earn a living. And you've lived your entire life. And this is education too. When you grow up living your entire life a certain way, it's the only thing you know. Violence, hatred, killing, maiming, shooting. That's how a lot of these, we've talked about this before on the show, how these kids of 10 years old, 9 years old are enlisted into these armies, and that's the only thing they know growing up until they're 20 years old. So what do? They're going to continue that. You can't change them after that. So a lot of these people, the process of change is tough to do. Why would you want to stop your business? It's perfectly legitimate now in their eyes that doing what they're doing, whether it's trafficking, whether it's killing, whether it's maiming, is a perfect example of them going, well, this is right, this is what I know, and this is what I live. So how do you combat that? I don't know. I just makes me go off. All right, let's talk about some barriers to attending school. Poverty. I mean, obviously, even here in the US, we deal with places that can't afford it. Different grades, different schools, different. It's one of the greatest barriers to higher education. Really is. I mean, for many children from poor families, the school fees alone and related costs of schooling put education well beyond their reach. I know you have your schools that you've dealt with, some of the kids that go to the schools. Have you ever seen, obviously some of the education you get in those schools, and last week we talked with Laurie Yearwood about how sometimes these schools, the public schools, are underfunded, don't have the right type of programs in there, and therefore are constantly asking the parents to actually try and help with funding for certain aspects of the school.
Constantly. What I see is a blend of heroics on behalf of undersupplied and under-equipped teachers who seriously feel that it's their responsibility to contribute to society in a way of, pushing education. And then I also see an organization that, quite frankly, could probably use a few Washington lobbyists, because the reason they get no funding on the state or even federal level is because there's just the government and the way the bureaucrats have it broken up. There's just no profit in it.
So okay, so let's talk about something else. Taxes. We pay taxes all the time. There are billions and billions of dollars in taxes, and yet we can't have, first of all, the basic things that we pay taxes for. Okay, maybe it's infrastructure, but we're dealing with infrastructure, which is economy. And that brings more money towards the US and to each different state. So why can't we, either as individual states or as on the federal level, be able to bring healthcare and education for what we pay our taxes for?
Well, isn't that the question, right? Unfortunately, you don't have a prerogative on how a lot of your taxes are spent.
True, exactly.
Which is regrettable.
Which then brings you into the whole fact you've got the public and private schools, because then you have a disparagement, is that the right word, of the haves and have-nots, people that can afford to put their kids in public school and in private school, and those that can't.
What's actually tragic here is a lot of public schools are on the brink of doing really well on behalf of the kids that attend there if they can just get a little more funding. I deal with this all the time on the charitable side. They can do real well. The means are there and the teachers are there. There's obviously things that should be changed, but it's an organization fighting to survive. We're lucky in California because we get to vote a lot more of how our taxes are spent than most states.
Right.
I think we get a chance to say, aqueducts, farming, certain bills. But, it's really tragic because what you're illustrating is the realities that there's no champion. Washington doesn't want to champion this because Washington doesn't want to improve the education of anybody, because Washington wants you to believe the rhetoric that comes out of Washington. The last thing Washington wants is a bunch of young people growing up idealistic that are going to challenge this old dinosaur, prehistoric, structured system of, indentured servitude that they've got us all married to.
Well, that goes way, 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 way back. I mean, this is human nature. Unfortunately, that is human nature.
It is human nature, but that's one of your key problems is Washington would much rather, invest in weaponry and weapon programs that we don't even need or will use or will be defunct than they would in the education of your kid.
The issue really goes back. It doesn't just go back, 50 years, 100 years, 200, 300. It goes back thousands of years.
Right, but we can't do anything about 1,000 years ago. I'm just
but what I'm saying is,
now.
like I said before, you have a kid that grows up that's 10 years old in the army, and then goes and when he's 20, 30 years old, that's all he knows, and that's the only thing. It's the same thing with human nature. When you're basically dealing with something, you go way back to Moses. Moses, when he basically was the king of the Israelites, he had people coming to him. The sheep were this person stole this. So he basically said, well, what we'll do, we'll create a society where everybody has a say. So he created the heads of the family, the heads of the town, the heads of the district, the heads of the region, and each one, and that was how it started. However, the problem was that greed and avarice basically turned that around. That then happened with the English system. The same thing happened way back to the Magna Carta back then, when you basically had that same thing. The lords, the ladies, the serfs, etc., came from that same idea that basically there was a voice from either the town or the village or the head of the family who then reported what they wanted, and that collective then went to the chief, who then dished out all the benefits. Same thing happened with the Declaration of Independence, I noticed, because I actually read that when I was sitting in a library for years ago. I was actually reading it and how it was actually formed. Exactly the same way. And what's happened? The issue is human nature's taken it back to the fact of, no, we want to have this, therefore the haves and the have-nots again split. Way back at the Declaration of Independence, you basically had saying every man is created equal. So therefore, everybody should have a share in the pie. But that doesn't work. It doesn't work, unfortunately. Until you basically change the way people think.
Well, the question was about education in the United States today. Now, if you want to bring up Moses got lost in the desert for 40 years. So the jury is still out on how intelligent he actually was. To be honest with you.
Well, I'm talking about the structure of how he led his people, and you've got to talk. If you're talking about that, then you're also going. I'm talking about the three structures that I know of, which are the English system of lords, ladies, king, queen, and country, and the same thing.
How do you feel about that being English?
How do I feel about that whole system?
The system, the royal family, all that.
Well, the interesting thing about that, from my point of view, is that I think it's good to actually have somebody that leads, but there has to be somebody that leads. Otherwise, I don't think we'd have a direction. However, the issue in England is the fact that you are basically looked upon, or more so before, not so much now, I think, but way before, 30 years, 40 years ago, and prior, you were based on how you spoke was basically who you were. Didn't matter whether you had money. It didn't matter who you were. If you spoke a certain way, you were treated a certain way because of the way you spoke. So if you talked like this all the time, and it didn't matter if you had no money, then you were still put on a pedestal because you were seen to be part of that elite.
I think that's true even now to some degree.
Well, to some degree it is, yeah.
But would you consider yourself a pro-royalist guy or abolish the whole thing?
Oh, I don't know really.
If it was to be dismantled tomorrow, would you be
you also have to remember that the royal family brings in millions a year in the economy from tourism. That whole structure there does bring a lot of money to the country.
Has anyone ever balanced this out, and is this why it exists? Because do they bring in more than they actually use up? Are they?
I don't know.
It's a very exorbitant lifestyle.
Well, it is a very exorbitant lifestyle.
I guess someone somewhere's probably done the math on it.
Yeah, but you've also got to realize something else, that the British, and I was having this discussion the other day with somebody, the British colonized so many countries over the years, and they're still getting a piece of it.
They are.
That tiny little country, which is sitting in the middle of the ocean over there.
The Falkland Islands.
Exactly. You've got the Falklands. Not even that. You've got Barbados, Bahamas.
Canada.
America. Think about it. We've had that discussion before about the IRS, a portion of every single tax in the US still goes to the English crown. One small portion. I don't get it.
I don't get
but
it
it's
either.
because it's a way. That's why England is so rich. So when you're talking about that, the Duke of Westminster is one of the richest people in the world. And that's probably a 3 square mile piece of turf. But the Duke of Westminster, that property over there is worth billions. So these guys, and it came from colonization. So
certainly the colonization had its benefits for some people. If the royal family was to be abolished tomorrow, how would you feel about that? I'm not.
How do you abolish them? What do you do?
There is a call to arms, basically, and it comes from, I think, basically, I mostly hear it from my British rock star friends who are like, they're tired of a queen. They don't want any part of it. They want it done with. And not everyone feels that way, obviously, but I was just kind of curious how you felt, because I don't think you and I have ever talked about it.
No, I mean, and again, we're digressing slightly from the subject
we
of
are,
education.
but it is educational in a sense.
It is educational.
So if somebody said Queen, is it Elizabeth or Victoria?
Elizabeth II.
Queen Elizabeth II, you're done tomorrow. We want your stuff on the street. Find yourself a nice apartment in Upper Soho. You're out.
You know what the Queen is, though? The Queen is the movie stars and the rock stars of America.
I agree.
Mean, it really
on
is.
Some level.
There's a certain adoration for it, and
there is that too. I agree with that.
So, to just let them go and become regular people, I don't know. I'm on the fence on that.
Are you
one,
on the fence because it's ceremonial in nature, and you like it? I mean, because it's part of your
pomp and circumstance.
Isn't that just part of it's part of the culture out there.
Well, it is part of the culture. It's grown. It is infused in the culture. I mean, I wish. I don't think it'll change overnight. I still think you're going to have, even though you abolish that whole system, you're still going to have the haves and have-nots. You're still going to have the lords, ladies who are going to be wealthy and be on top of the food chain. That's not going to change.
No, that's true. That's true. But
let's just jump back. I want to jump back to education.
I think we should revisit this at some point.
It'll be a very interesting topic to go. But let's talk about education. We talked about, now in England, you actually do get free education in England.
Which is another model that the United States should follow.
Well, that's it. But, the interesting thing is
healthcare and education.
But, sometimes with free education in some countries, parents actually, they constantly say the indirect costs of education. Because when you go to school, you've got, uniforms, textbooks, teacher salaries, school maintenance fees, all those types of things are actually paid for by the parents. So those costs actually prevent some kids from going to school. Now, England might not have as a bad a time with that, because I think everybody can kind of afford to put their kids through school. But when you're dealing with other countries like Africa or some other probably third world or even second world, if you want to call them countries, have a problem with sending their kids to school because of those issues.
Right.
Fees. I mean, and the interesting thing is, a lot of them, even though you've dropped fees for primary school, a lot of secondary school fees have not ever dropped. They've never dropped. So what are you going to do? Put your kids through school partly? I mean, I have that discussion with my wife all the time. If we go and put her through a certain system, are we going to be able to keep her up in that system? Because dropping her out and changing that entire way that she's been able to learn, or what she's learning, is
your
more
daughter
detrimental.
we're talking about?
Yeah, I'm talking about my daughter. So I'm talking about in general. That's the same type of thing. Child labour.
Well, are you actually bringing up the subject of child labour?
Yeah, I think we've got to go to that one too. That's another one.
That's a tough one.
That's a tough one. Child labour actually. Here's one of my facts here. It actually involves an estimated 246 million children around the globe.
And now, when you say that, what sense are we talking about? Are we talking like sweatshop?
The right to education is inextricably linked to the phenomenon of child labour. Basically, kids in sweatshops, one of our heroes of the week, one of our very, very early heroes of the week, and John Beerley, if he was here, God bless him, I know he's away this week. He's not online. I'm palpitating. Actually, I know where he's gone. He's gone to a sci-fi convention in California, from what I understand.
There's a sci-fi convention?
There is. He's somewhere in California.
And you're not going to it?
No, I'm not going to it. I don't think so, no. But one of our early heroes actually went to India to... because he saw that there was child labour.
Right,
do you remember?
Very impressive, yeah.
And now they have a very 2 million strong organisation, and I'm bad of me to not remember the name of the organisation, but it was people want to change that. I mean, you got households that live in poverty, and kids might be pulled out of school and put into work because that household is poor. I saw kids in Romania, for instance, on the streets. And it was mainly the gypsies, but they're on the streets and their arms and legs were broken purposely by their parents because they could go to work rather than putting them in school because they could earn money for the family.
And go to work by begging?
Begging, yes. And that's begging.
The sympathy. It's the sympathy.
Exactly. So there's different ways that it's done. Sometimes it's put into sweatshops. Sometimes you stick them on the streets because the family can't afford to live. So, you've got... You leave school, you enter the labour market prematurely. A kid misses the chance to basically lift them. It's a cycle, really, and I guess the parents don't know how to get out of it, because when you put the kids in school, they then get an education and are able to lift themselves and their families and their communities out of that cycle of poverty. But the kids are put into child labour and put into those situations because the family can't afford it. Right. So how do you get out of that? I mean, I know that in the Philippines, for instance, in the middle of Manila, and I actually witnessed this, there are kids and families living in corrugated huts on the streets. On the streets. We had a kid, when I was filming in 99 in Manila, there was a child died. A young child, 2 years old, died like half a block from where we were shooting. So there was a funeral, etc. But these are kids dying on the streets. And because the families are poor, so they can't get an education. So when you consider families living in poverty, children's time is considered a cost, because if they're not in school or an education program, they could earn an income or perform other activities to help the family. So that's a very basic fact. And child labour is work that deprives kids of their childhood. It's not even that, it's the potential, it's their dignity. I'd hate the fact that I wouldn't be able to give that. I'd stick my kid into, working for a living. I mean, we used to do that way back. Way back in the 50s, 40s. It was a much bigger issue. No, I never did child labour. Well, I mean, I might say that my mother put me through doing the gardening, but I wouldn't say that was child labour.
Yeah, that's indentured.
I don't want to do that.
That's indentured servitude. Yeah.
But in the most extreme forms, it involves kids being enslaved and then separated from their families, and exposed to serious hazards and illnesses, and a lot of time die or left to fend themselves in a lot of large cities, on the streets of large cities. So it can actually start at a very young age. I'm looking at my list this morning, thank you, Bev, is absolutely enormous about what this does. I mean, it affects the gender, it affects the infrastructure, it gives you there's the shortage of qualified teachers. There's so many different things that actually allow kids to learn in school, and I thank the Lord that I'm actually able to put my kids through a decent education. But I do want to do something now. I want to change this little thing a little bit right now, because we've been talking a lot about the bad stuff, and since John Bailey's not here,
let's talk about the good stuff.
Let's talk about the good stuff. And I want to get to our latest hero of the week. But before I do, we had one of our previous heroes, Dalton Sear, a 14-year-old singer and recording artist who came in to the studio. He writes and plays his own songs, and he's actually performed for us here. Mm-hmm. He's also the national ambassador for Dream Factory. Great kid, constantly performs for children at hospitals, charity events. And a couple of years ago, he recorded a song called You're Not Alone to benefit children and families of American soldiers who have been deployed overseas. And on May the 2nd, he'll accept the Songs of Hope Award for You're Not Alone at the Dare to Dream Music Festival at the Thousand Oaks Teen Center in Thousand Oaks, California. Yeah, man. Cool. The purpose of the event is to empower people to follow their dreams and make a positive impact in their communities. And the raffle proceeds from the event will actually support the LA Dream Center's human trafficking shelter. So there is a very good cause to it. And Dalton will also be doing a few performances back in his hometown in Jacksonville, Florida at the end of April, including a trip to Wolfson Children's Hospital, where he'll perform in their studio, which is broadcast into all of the patients' rooms. And you can find more about Dalton's stuff at Dalton's website, daltonsear.com. Congratulations, Dalton. We'd love to have you back and hear more that you're doing. But you're definitely a positive change for children and for adults too in the world, because we lead by example. Hero of the week. Today's hero of the week fits right into our theme of education. Rachel Ley is a 17-year-old from Stevens Point, Wisconsin. I was in Wisconsin Madison, Wisconsin. I don't know how far Stephen's Point is, but from the time Rachel was an infant until she entered kindergarten, her mother put her on a special 10-book-a-day diet in which she reads 10 books to Rachel every day. By the time Rachel entered elementary school, she was a voracious reader who noticed that many of her classmates struggled with basic literacy. They were embarrassed to have to read in front of the class because they couldn't read all the words. And that's one of the basic things I think is very hard for kids, is being embarrassed in front of their others, and they don't do things because of it. And some of these kids even said they hated reading because they had so much trouble with it, not because they didn't want to do it. So, just as all our heroes of the week have done, Rachel wanted to do something to make a difference. After her mother helped her secure an initial grant for $500, Rachel founded Literacy for Little Ones in April of 2009. And over the past 6 years, Rachel and her team of 700 student volunteers, you got 700 student volunteers, amazing. They have assembled and distributed packages of books to every family with an infant born in her network that now includes 12 hospitals in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Nicaragua, and with help from various grants and corporate sponsors. Each package of books includes a letter to the family from Rachel that explains the benefits of providing children with an early love for literacy. She recently won the Gloria Barron Prize for Young Heroes, and her mission statement reads, The mission of Literacy for Little Ones is to encourage parents to read to their newborns, which creates a special bond in the family, builds a strong foundation for education, and instills a lifelong love of reading. Rachel says, I've come to see that volunteerism is really about realizing how fortunate I am. I'm just trying to give back some of what others have given me. And I definitely agree with that, Rachel, and that's why you're Peace Fund Hero, Radio Hero of the Week. I'll say that again, you're Peace Fund Radio Hero of the Week. And Rachel was just accepted into Miami University in Ohio, and she plans to keep Literacy for Little Ones going while she's still in college. And to read more about Rachel's programs, you can visit her website at literacyforlittleones.com. Congratulations, Rachel. That's awesome. I noticed that too. My kids, we read to them every day. My kids read at least 3 or 4 or 5 books a day, and they really do like reading. And then I watch them going off and reading the books on their own. Have you ever done that with your kids?
Yeah.
I mean, you watch them, the first time they start doing it, they're actually reading what you've read them. They don't know, they're not reading it, they're kind of remembering it, but they want to read what's in the text. I think it's so cute. And it's so adorable to watch them do it, and then you go, "Wow, they really did get something out of what I was reading them."
Brilliant.
Did you do that with your daughter? Did your daughter read a lot when she was a kid?
You know what? I would read as much as I could. She sometimes preferred to play with things.
Play with things, such as
like engineer things, build things, draw things.
Interesting.
Drawing's
another thing, though. That's another motor skill, which is very important.
Yeah, and she would create a lot of times her own stories, which made. I'd read when I could, but a lot of times she'd just play herself to sleep. She'd much prefer running around.
Would she?
Yeah.
I think books and education, I mean, there's 62 million girls around the world that are not in school. And even more struggle to... I think, we're very fortunate here to actually have a society that accepts women in the classroom. Mm-hmm. Girls are every day taken out of school because they're either married off, way too young, or they're subjected to violence in school. So, it's proven that with education, girls can lift themselves and everyone around them out of poverty. So I think it's very important to do that. I actually want to give you a couple of facts here. Every year a girl stays in school, her income can increase by 15 to 25%. There is 20% increase in child survival when household income is in the mother's hands. Think about that. Mm-hmm. If 10% more girls attend school, a country's GDP increases by an average of 3%. Do you know how many millions and billions of dollars that is?
How much is that?
If 10% more girls attend school, and read it again, if 10% more girls
I'm looking for it too, actually.
attend school, a country's GDP increases by an average of 3%. Right. When a girl receives more education, they're 6 times less likely to be married as a child and will have 2.2 fewer yet healthier children who are more likely to go to school themselves. And each year of a mother's schooling cuts infant mortality by between 5 and 10%. Why would we not want our women to go to school? Why would we not want that? I mean, I guess it comes back again from the age of men are hunters, women are gatherers, and basically that's how we want it to be, because that keeps us in the level of power, which I was talking about before, about control. And we were talking about why does it not happen in certain countries? Because there is a control issue that we're dealing with. I mean, these facts are pretty clear. If you empower a girl through education, she'll change the world around her. But without an education, they're much more likely to marry young and have children early and then continue that cycle of poverty. So I think it's unfortunate that is... So I think we're fortunate in this country, and God bless us, that we're actually able to do this, to give women an education and girls an education so they can actually change our lives.
Right. Well, the future is in education. I mean, that's what all your statistics lead us to believe, and we know it to be the fact.
Yeah, I always remember, one of the first things that, as I've mentioned before, the Peace Fund did was school makes a difference.
Which was very impressive.
Yeah, and I do want to restart that program once we get our structure.
What your program really cited for all of us was that intelligent people are, in fact, the resource, especially on an economy like the U.S., which is basically now driven by intellectual property, since we don't build anything anymore here.
Yeah, it's interesting
that
smart
people.
The funny thing was, I was thinking about this yesterday. I mean, when you're traveling around, I walked past a guy yesterday, and he's going, "Yeah, this guy's going to make 14 million this year," and I'm thinking, 14 million. And I know that my business is 3 or 4, 5 million. If people are going to, and I'm thinking, wow,
that's money I couldn't even spend.
No, you can't. You sit there going, really?
I wouldn't even know what to do with that. And honestly, if I did spend that on things for myself, I would probably feel terrible.
Yeah, but my point is, okay, it might have been a company that he was talking. I just happened to listen to this conversation as I was walking past. My point is that we are able to get those type of numbers. Can you imagine if you're living in Africa, 14 million, about 14,000 for the year would be
buy your own country for that.
Well, yeah, I mean, so it's not a question of, it just gives us the opportunity, and you wouldn't have the opportunity if you didn't have the right educational process.
Exactly, and I think that's what's lost a lot of these discussions, is the value education plays in the innovation process.
Mm-hmm. I want to give a shout out, actually, while we're talking about that right now. Or do I? No, I want to go to qualified teachers. Because, that's another thing we discussed last week, which was there's certain barriers to quality learning and having a shortage of some qualified teachers. There's some 125 million school children around the world who are unable to read a single sentence even after 4 years of attendance, which is basically a waste of $129 billion a year. And this is a United Nations report which calls on governments to draft the best teachers to teach the most underprivileged if the goal of universal education is ever to be reached. The report noted that in around a third of the countries, less than 75% of primary school teachers are trained according to national standards. Some 57 million children are not in school at all. So we talked about this with Laurie last week, and this was the fact that, you get some classes that the teacher is either as burnt out, is not qualified, etc. And how do you do it? Do you actually put your more experienced teachers to the lesser fortunate children? And then you have to deal with the fact that then their salary is less. So would you, as an individual, as a teacher, if you spent your time going to school to learn to become a teacher, would you want your salary to be less because you're teaching underprivileged children? So how do you deal with that?
Well, unfortunately, there's not enough incentive to attract people to the workplace that is teaching. You get a few die-hard teachers who are fantastic, and you get some people who decide to do it. But there's just no incentive there to make it a horse race of talent.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, most of the teachers don't make anything.
Well,
really.
That's the reason. And originally, this happened also.
I would love to change that too.
Well, we talked about health and education.
Cut one stealth bomber out of the budget and give it to teachers.
Isn't that interesting? One stealth bomber.
One that we probably won't even use.
How much is a stealth bomber? Anybody know how much a stealth bomber is?
Several $100 million.
Yeah, exactly. Just take... I would love somebody to do the calculations on that. I mean, I'm sure some of our regular listeners would do it. Somebody, Google for me now, how much does a stealth bomber cost? and how many teachers are there in the US, and just basically amortize that cost over the teachers and see what we could do just to change the educational system in this country alone.
It'd be fantastic.
It would be incredible.
It would be a great day. I mean, I think we agree on this. I think we both like to see teachers paid better for starters.
Well, it's not only actually having. Well, I mean, I'm wondering whether that's one of the issues is that the pay doesn't go there. So therefore, you as an individual, when you're going through school, you don't want to become a teacher because the pay is bad.
My daughter's had 7 teachers. I would say 6 were fantastic. The 7th was good.
Right.
Most of them had a passion for it. They loved doing it, and it was impressive to see that. But most of them were overworked, battling fatigue, and constantly it was just an avalanche of papers and things.
Well, this is what Laurie was saying. So when the school day ends, and not many of us realize this, the school day ends, the teacher still has to do stuff like
you don't
mark
work.
homework.
You don't work kid hours.
It doesn't go there. No, they're still doing another 3 or 4 or 5 hours afterwards to get all these report cards and all the little. I remember going to my daughter's school. They had a farmers market type of thing where the kids and the teachers, they made all these little things themselves, and they sold them with fake money type of thing. But that the teachers spent hours putting all this other stuff together. It wasn't just when the kids go to school. That's when they actually spent the time.
I think I told you that I took on coaching my daughter's soccer team.
Yes, you did.
And it's amazing how much work just goes into that nobody sees. Mm-hmm. It's from game planning to planning practices. I mean, imagine being a teacher. You think it's so easy. Like, what do you just show up one day and your lesson plan is there for you? No, you got to design all that.
Well, that's the other thing. The other thing is, and what Laurie was saying last week was the fact that you have some teachers that, let's say it's February, you've got Valentine's Day, and they've got their Valentine's packet that they've used for the past 20 years. Mm-hmm. They're not going to change it because it's more work for them to change. That's why you have kids don't learn, because after 20 years or 10 years even, kids change. You've got to change with the times and what you're actually showing the kids and what their level of acceptance is. Today's issue with the past 20 years of changing the revolution in schools of smart boards and iPads and computers and stuff, kids learn in a different way than we ever did before. When I was a kid, I never had that in my school. So you've got to change with the times, but some teachers can't. They don't have the time, like you said. They don't want to. To do a package like that would take them days. Yeah. So, I mean, in actual fact, when you're looking at the numbers globally, we actually need an additional 1.6 million teachers to achieve universal primary education. 1.6 million. So why is there that shortage? It's, based on salaries, I would imagine, not being able to fund the ability to educate teachers or have people come into the educational system.
You want to ask a man or a woman to sacrifice a good part of their future as a teacher and probably struggle to make their mortgage payment. It's not a very attractive option for a lot of people.
Yes, I've just got from Tyson Sana. Thank you, Tyson, for doing that research for us. I just saw it on our Twitter page. There's over $2 billion each for a stealth bomber.
$2 billion.
$2 billion for a stealth bomber. Get rid of the stealth bomber. Teach our kids. Get out. Can you imagine what we would do with $2 billion in our educational system? And somebody goes, well, it's not as simple as that. Sorry. Yes, it is. It's very simple.
As simple as you want it to be.
Yeah, it can be as simple as you want it to be. I mean, $2 billion. I mean, it's ridiculous.
$2 billion for a stealth bomber.
Yeah, $2 billion. I mean, it's... I don't know.
What about that crazy Osprey chopper plane that Dick Cheney, forced through the Pentagon, forced it on the budget? It was billions of dollars, and it was never given the green light to be of service because it was determined it was dangerous and really not.
Well, I'm sorry, Dick Cheney is not my favorite person. To be
I don't think he's anybody's favorite person.
I think the man's a megalomaniac.
But of course he is. But I'm showing you an example of a guy who forces a multi-billion-dollar project through because that's where his profit margins personal profit margins lie. You
That's
just think, God,
but
one
that
program.
I mean, you can't just say that's him. There's a lot of people in governments. I'm dealing with.
yeah.
I mean, the government in
it's
Hungary
the
right
people
now.
that grease them.
Yeah, there's a people. I mean, and it's interesting because you have certain governments that you vote in, and then when they're voted in, they do what they want. I mean, that
administration is a great example of that.
And it's not only this country. I mean, a lot of countries have the same issue.
It is everywhere, and it's
again that goes back to what I was saying before. You go in with the greatest intentions, and then
But this comes back to education as well, because what we were saying at the top of the show was. People like Dick Cheney don't want a bunch of intelligent people challenging him.
Correct.
He wants you to think he's the smartest guy in the room. Stay quiet. I'm talking. That's always been his demeanor.
Well, unfortunately, the world is changing, and I think with the internet. I mean, we have talked about. There is so much information you can get from the internet, and I would not give that to a child solely because just dealing with internet on iPad and smartphones, etc., is an issue. But there is information you can get from there.
There is, and again, education, back to you on this, plays a vital part because there's so much misinformation on the internet in order to sway people one direction or another that you have to know how to research your news and media and your contacts appropriately.
Correct.
So you know what you're looking at.
Correct.
It has some
reality
in it.
Doesn't that go back down to teachers being able to teach you
it does.
how to do it correctly?
So many possible problems can be solved when having the educational discussion.
It would be interesting if, as you said, at a top level, that you could actually look at the fact of having, allowing teachers to have continued professional development and growth. Yeah. There's like any company. I mean, you take a company. I mean, okay, teachers. There's a teacher, then you become the principal or the vice principal. That's it, right? What if there was some way that there was some sort of incentive that teachers had if their kids had better grades than anything else? Imagine that. I mean, if you go and sell a house. You sell a house for your company, you get a percentage of what that house is. Why couldn't we do that possibly for teachers?
I think you should do something like that. I mean, you have to be careful with incentives because sometimes people, forge goals.
Yeah, but you can't forge kids' results.
But you do see kids all the time who can't read who somehow make it into high school.
Yes, that's true.
Because if they're flunked, that counts against them tax-wise.
But then the whole that's absolutely true. But that's the teacher's honesty. And the other thing is when you put a kid through an exam, perhaps it should be the principal of the school or some other independent party that actually tests them. And therefore, it's the whole structure. I mean, we're talking about the infrastructure.
I'm for all of this. If an incentive works, better pay works, get them whatever they need. Because quite frankly, this is the primary building block. I mean, this literally is your foundation. Everything the human race will become is built upon the childhood educational experience and process.
Correct.
So if you want to have a country, a neighborhood, or a family that can even survive in the 21st century, they need to have an IQ that reaches a certain level.
True.
Mixed with initiative, and then perhaps you got a chance.
Yes. Agreed. Well, this is something we agree on. This is good.
Very rare.
Very rare.
Well, I mean, I think we're both we agree more than we lead on.
We do.
Actually.
I know.
But no, the truth of it is what you're saying is very, very important, and it's very frustrating for both of us. I know because you hear it in sort of a polluted sort of sense out of Washington, like we need education, and then they don't do anything.
Okay, we have our researcher doing this right now. One Osprey, which was what you were talking about.
The Osprey.
Osprey, yeah, it's $75 million.
$75 million.
That didn't work.
And they built fleets of them.
It
and
didn't
they'll
work.
Never see the light of day. I mean, they're sitting there. It's going to be like an airplane graveyard off in some place, Wyoming, where Cheney lives, basically. Where he owns the state.
Yeah, he probably can fly in them, so he can go and visit his cow farm or whatever.
The money was spent on that. It was built
$75 million.
simply for special interests.
Yeah.
And he forced it for special interests. And it would be nice to flood. I mean, $75 million. I mean, that's $1.5 million per state.
Yeah. Isn't it? You just did the math then. That was very good. I'm very impressed with that.
Because I have an education. I have a basic education. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, look, I'm gonna just put out this. There are so many other things that we're going to talk about again next week. We've been talking about shortage of qualified teachers, but we've got talk of lack of learning materials, weak foundation for early learning, challenging family environments, language barriers, hunger and poor nutrition, ineffective systems to evaluate the performance of students. There are so many things we are going to be talking about on this show regarding this, and I think we'll bring in some more people to actually discuss this with us, because I think it's a very important topic. But I do want to give a shout out as we quickly close the show. Again, even just you and me talking, this has kind of made our time go by. Build On. Build On is a movement. They empower U.S. urban youth to transform their neighborhoods and the world through intensive community service. Globally, they're constructing a new school every 3 days in some of the economically poorest countries around the world. They build schools with villages that have historically no adequate school structure, where students are squeezed into dark and crumbling mud huts, or are taught under trees where the weather permits, or have to walk many miles to the neighbouring village, or can't attend a school at all. You can find out more about them on www.buildon.org, as well as Girl Rising, girlrising.com. They have a global campaign for girls' education. They use the power of storytelling to share the simple truth that educating girls can transform societies. Girl Rising unites girls, women, boys and men who believe every girl has the right to go to school and the right to reach their own potential. You can reach them through girlrising.com. It's time for the end of the show, Ethan. Amazing, isn't it?
Sad, very sad.
Sad, but true. Next week we'll have John Bailey. We'll have a couple of other people on the show. We actually also will be still here talking about education and fighting the facts out there. So thank you for listening to us all out there. Remember to go to thepeacefund.org if you want to find out more about what we're doing. We are going to be, again, there's lots of stuff still coming. I know I keep promising it. There are things that we keep cramming in. The show does take a lot of our time. But in closing, a quote by George Evans. Every student can learn, just not on the same day or in the same way. This is Adrian Paul and Ethan Dettenmaier. We'll talk again.
You're listening to Peace Fund Radio with Ethan Dettenmaier and Adrian Paul, right here on LA Talk Radio.